What's the strangest conversation you've accidentally eavesdropped on? Black family in the Christmas decorations aisle. 3-year-old. Dad. Can we get a white man for Christmas? Shocked dad. What? 3-year-old. A white man points at shelf. Shocked dad. Looks where son is pointing and laughs. No son. That's called a snowman. I've told this before, but whatever. 2 of my students were talking about this guy texting one of the girls, saying they think he's texting her to get to her friend who recently got her phone taken away. I chalk it up to middle school drama. Day goes on. Later I hear the girl who had her phone taken away say, I think I'm scarred, and something didn't sit right with me about it. I circled back and was like, hey kid, need to talk to me about anything? She mulled out over for a bit and asked for a private convo. Turns out this guy had sent a third girl a dong pic, and oh yeah, he's not a guy their age. It's their teacher for an out of school extracurricular. That was not a fun day. Good on you for listening and reporting. Glad you were the trusted adult. I was pulling up to an intersection with a bus stop right as the light turned green. I crept by this stop and all I heard was an old black dude saying, that's how the motherfucker took my leg. I look out my passenger window to see him with a prosthetic in his hand, sitting in a wheelchair, facing the other people at the bus stop. IDK what story they heard, but it was damned good. Forrest Gump has nothing on this dude. A few kids were debating on what happened to the poop after you flushed it on the train. One believed it exploded on impact with the rails, another debated the possibility of it being shot out of the side like a cannon, and another knew it was used to fuel the train. He knew it was used as fuel. I was on the train listening to a woman yell on the phone that she wouldn't be able to make it to her dentist appointment because she had left her teeth at home. Happens to the best of us. Didn't hear the full conversation, but I walked in on 2 employees at a convenience store with the conversation ending with the phrase, and that's when we hid the clams. This is one of the simplest stories in this thread, and yet it's the only that's made me laugh more than a chuckle. Thanks for sharing. Killing time in Starbucks before my bus comes when 2 well-dressed businessmen walk in. Hey, crazy day yesterday. Haha, yeah, I didn't know you could train dogs to do that. It haunts me. I have so many questions that will never be answered. At a Chinese restaurant, an old man says to his friend, I'm telling you my balls swelled up like this. Then he holds his hands apart like he's holding a grapefruit. Once listened to a story a woman was telling her friend sitting next to me in a cafe. She became suspicious of her husband cheating on her when she was helping him unpack from a business trip and noticed a weird white stain on his shirt. She told the whole story of her googling how to figure out what it was, which I think included using specific light and stuff. Never actually got to hear the ending though, unfortunately. I once sat on my balcony, 3rd floor, at 2 AM to listen to a guy, ground level, who discovered his girlfriend was cheating on him. 4th floor, he climbed a tree and saw her topless with a guy with her light on. I opened a beer and took a seat. You said you were studying. You don't study with your shirt off. Was checking into a luxury hotel when I was younger, and the people in the next room were frickin' like animals. So I keyed a bit slower than I normally would have because I had never been in this situation and I was intrigued, and then in between grunts and moans she yells, I bet your wife doesn't frick you like this. Probably goes on every day, but I never heard something like that before or since. Plot twist. It was a married couple role playing to spice things up. I was once in a Starbucks in Boston and witnessed a breakup which was immediately followed a failed proposal attempt. It was the craziest thing. The dude was very into her and her body language did not reply in a copacetic manner. He confessed his love to her. She replied that it wasn't gonna work and she might need some time. He replied, we have the rest of our lives to figure it out, so you have time there. He got down on a knee, pulled out a ring. She stood up and said, this is what I am talking about. You don't listen. She asked him to stand up. He said with tears in his eyes, why? I am still waiting for an answer. She gathered her things, took left out the back. The man sat back down and finished his frappuccino while crying. I refer to the story as the saddest cold coffee beverage ever. Maybe it's just me, but I think that goes beyond merely not listening. My neighbor's talking to a prostitute about paying the price of 1 hour, but she wanted double the pay cause there were 2 guys with her. She wanted 1 hour per person, and the guys wanted to pay 1 hour period. As an independent contractor she should be paid piecemeal. There were 2 units of output so she should be paid for both. In the 90s when people used to use cordless phones you could pick up phone calls on a scanner. This is how I found out our downstairs neighbor was cooking and selling large quantities of them out of his apartment. Was working behind a bar in Birmingham, England. Walked back up to the other end of the bar where I was originally serving this one woman and the convo went like this. Woman: yeah, me and John had a great 20 years of marriage. I can't complain. Randomer at the bar: oh that's lovely. You eventually had to part ways then? Woman: I had to divorce him in the end, yeah. I found out he was sexually abusing children. As I walked up to their end of the bar, I stopped to check something on the till and accidentally made eye contact with the both of them. Absolutely horrifying. Me and some co-workers were eating lunch outside on a patio and all of a sudden 2 guys walk by and one goes, I was licking her butthole and forget I was allergic to peanuts so I spent the night in a hospital. We started cracking up and the guy noticed and said, what? It happens. Just last week, I was in line for customer service at the grocery store with my girlfriend. Sketchy looking dude comes up to the woman in line behind us, says hi, and she says something to the effect of, I don't think I should be talking to you right now. I don't even know where my daughter is. They started talking quieter and we couldn't make out all of what they were saying, but we at one point heard her say something along the lines of, why can't you just admit that she might be in Iowa? Unfortunately our turn to get help came up, and we had to abandon the conversation. Wish we would have been able to hear more. In high school, I was in the school cafeteria line and overheard a couple of students talking about war. One guy was confidently explaining how he was sure that Sweden was going to invade Finland soon and that he was planning going back there to defend it with his dad and uncle. Dad was from Åland Island and at their family estate they would set up the first line of defense. This was in Sweden in 2007. The invasion never happened. Yet. 2 guys on a plane, flying to a wedding. Sounded like they were in the wedding party. They were going back and forth about how the bride had fricked at least half the groomsmen, and even one of the bridesmaids. It sounded like it happened in the past, rather than an infidelity thing. But maybe those guys were super casual about adultery. They were trying to figure out if the groom knew. They decided he probably didn't know. So then they were arguing the merits of telling him versus keeping their mouth shut. They never came to a conclusion on the plane. She sounds like one interesting woman. Or just a small town. My downstairs neighbors were having a fight. I was listening to a woman yelling, "Did you frick her? Did you frick her?" over and over. It really got exciting when another woman answered, "No, no, I didn't." 2 college-age dudes walking by me, and that's why I'm going to heck. No, you're going to heck because of all that dong you suck. That's true. I do suck a lot of dong. That's something me and my boys would say goofing off LMAO. Back in grade school, my mom would pick me up from school, then we'd go back to her office and I'd wait there until her last class for the day ends. One time, one of her co-teachers just barged into her office and talked about how tired she was because she had gotten married the weekend before and she and her new husband had been having a lot of sex since. They ended up talking about it as if I wasn't in the room. Till the origin story of Dancer Roboto's teacher-student fetish. Behind 2 ladies in church. Lady 1 says quietly out of the side of her mouth, "I have a very unladylike itch." Lady 2 whispers back, "That's okay, I just farted." I was in line for a roller coaster years ago when I overheard a 12-year-old and her even younger sister talking to 2 nice strangers, all standing in line behind me. The 12-year-old was talking about how she lives on a farm with her grandparents, her little sister and her newborn kid. She goes on and on about her young kid, and how her grandparents homeschool her so she has time to raise and take care of her kid, and how her little sister is helping too. She goes on to describe how little and precious and sweet her kid is and how much she loves her. I spent the entire time in line stunned and speechless and impressed by how engaged and unbothered the 2 strangers were during the whole conversation, i.e. asking to see pictures, etc. It wasn't until we got to the front of the line that I realized she meant kid, as in a baby goat. As a person who has raised goats, I have always loved surprising people with statements like that because people don't think about a kid being anything other than human. I once was taking with a friend in high school and stated, yeah, I've had to kill a couple kids before. If you do it right it tastes really good, and I got several very weird looks from the surrounding tables. While I was sitting at a bus stop, this guy walked up looking really pale and kind of dirty and sat nearby me. I actually had my headphones in my ears but no music was playing yet, so I am guessing the guy assumed I couldn't hear his conversation. He started describing the way a person's body looked as they laid on the ground, and when he touched their skin it was ice cold, saying that blood was everywhere and he didn't know what to do, so he left. So as I noticed, he started looking to see if I was paying attention and talking lower. I tried to act like I was listening to music cause I was petrified. I still till this day don't know if it was a joke, if he witnessed murder, or committed one himself, but that was definitely weird. If it's any consolation, if the body was cold they must have died a while ago. He wasn't likely the killer, as the body would have still been warm then. I was walking out of the post office and I stopped near the exit because I wanted to pack my stuff into my backpack. I stood by the wall and there was a door next to me. As I was packing, I heard a man saying that someone in his family hung themselves on a tree. The body was hanging for weeks and after time, the corpse got separated from the head and fell down. It looked like someone was sitting under the tree, resting in the shadow. The head was still hanging above the rest of the body. That's the only part of the conversation I've heard because I left the building. That was pretty messed up to hear, especially in a public place like that. That sounds positively gothic. Whoa. In the library and a girl on the phone says, "Baby, just come over, I want to make love to you and make spaghetti. I know I can't change the past but I can change your future. I know I can't change the past but I can make the pasta." I was eating at a small cafe, and I overheard the older women next to my table talking about how their young female neighbor got AIDS as a result of the time that she spent with Nigerian painters. Well, sort of the opposite, but when I was in high school, we would run laps around the perimeter drive of our football field for pay, and part of this drive was right up next to a bunch of classrooms. A lot of times, teachers would have the windows open. My high school is an old Frankenstein of additions from the last 120 years, so we still have windows that open and close. So my friends and I made it a point to have the absolute weirdest conversations we could right next to any of these open windows in an effort to distract and confuse anyone who happened to be listening from inside. I think my favorite starter anecdote was, and I shamelessly stole this from Whose Line, and that's how my colon ended up in my esophagus. I was later told by one of the teachers who recognized me that their whole class stopped and confusedly looked at each other before laughing it off. It was one of my proudest moments. Messing with strangers like that is one of the funnest things you can do. Childish but fun as frick. It wasn't a weird conversation, but an exceptional coincidence. I was halfway around the world in Greece, eavesdropping on 3 girls gossiping about one of my old co-workers over dinner. What are the chances? Talking about chances, apparently one of my friends saw my old English teacher at a nude beach in France whilst on holiday there. They supposedly made eye contact too. Must have been very awkward. Not a conversation per se, but I was randomly looking at my neighbor's laptop screen in class once, and she was frantically googling things like what to do when you've lost your engagement ring. I felt pretty bad for her. Gangster type sitting behind me on the bus, on his phone, rationalizing murdering his ex-girlfriend and anybody who got in the way to a friend of his trying to talk him out of it. The gangster was telling his friend that this was something that Jesus would do. The next few days I kept an eye on local news and thankfully no reports of anybody being murdered. First night in college, my roommate and I got to Perkins, dinerish restaurant, for a late night meal and to get to know each other. They sit us next to 3 girls in their early 20s. They decided to play What's Your Weirdest Sexual Experience. My friend and I bonded over our silence and immediate facial expression based don't say a freaking word and just listen agreement. One girl said she met a guy on a blind date. He had flowers, so she banged him on a tree limb. They started in the tree house and wanted to be dangerous. I still don't care if it was staged or a lie or a sorority dare, but that roommate is still like family. It's been 20 years. A couple sitting on a bench in a park, talking low-key to each other. He said something to which she giggled and said no. He repeated it and she laughed a bit louder, saying no again. After he leaned in for the third time she snapped and clearly said, "No, I will not pee on you." Last night I was at a AAA farm team game in my city and two men were sitting right behind me. They were friends from college. One was married and sounded more honest and mature, the other one wasn't married and described his apartment as being empty of anything but his mattress on the floor of his bedroom. The second guy kept calling girls either hot or ugly and his friend asked him to tone it down a bit. They were saying this truly just 12 inches behind my ears and they were talking loud to be heard over the commercials playing on the screen before the game. The second one asked the mature one if he thought he could hit one of the pitches and he replied not without some training. The second one claimed he could hit one of those any day of the week. Eventually I moved because the second one wanted advice on getting laid and I just couldn't take it anymore. It is a mystery why that man is still single. This happened the other day and only just remembered. Was cycling home and overtook some young lads. At a glance I'd say about 13-14 years old, mouthing off to each other. But as I was cycling past I genuinely overheard, "Oh mate, you know what I'm going to get when I'm older and have my own garden? A frickin' fuchsia." I just couldn't. Till fuchsia is a plant and not just a color. I work at Walmart so I tend to hear a lot of things I really shouldn't. One time I was stocking and I overheard a couple who looked they were straight from the backwards bickering with each other. He's pleading that he's sorry and that he didn't mean to. Then he says, "Baby, I am sorry, I didn't know she was my cousin, it just slipped in. I didn't know these things happened enough to have an open conversation about it at Walmart." I mean, it's freaking Walmart, anything is game for open conversation. When I was 16 or so, the landline rang with my dad's cell number, so I answered. I turned out to be a pocket dial. I listened in for several minutes to hear my dad screaming obscenities at someone who hadn't paid him for a drug delivery. At this point, I knew he was an alcoholic and did drugs regularly. He'd often disappear for days, and none could get a hold of him. I just hadn't realized how involved in the other side of the process he was, and on top of that, he rarely cursed around my sisters and me. He went on to yell about how he needed that money to buy his kids Christmas presents, which broke my heart on a whole other level because he was using us an exercise in guilt and lying the whole time. I knew that, come Christmas, any presents under the tree were likely the result of my mom begging him for money to find us a few small items or from my brothers pitching in money from their jobs to get us gifts. I'm sorry that you went through that. This one pulled at my heartstrings. What a heavy burden to bear to hear that. I was at a rave and we went outside to the smoking area, past a group of people, and one guy was really excitedly saying, "You're gonna die, I'm gonna die, and everyone we know is gonna die." Really wish I'd stopped to hear where that was going. Pill epiphany. Two French strippers talking about one of them having period blood running down her leg while on stage. It was a dress shop and I was sitting in the husband chair while my wife tried on dresses. They were sharing a room and would come out to the three-way mirror and speak in French while they posed modeled their dresses. When my wife finally came out and it was time to leave, I looked at them both and said au revoir. At least their period didn't start while giving a guy a lap dance, but to her credit that stripper refunded me and paid for my pants. I was eavesdropping on some popular girls in middle school, and the question came up between who they thought they would hook up with in my group of friends. They said my name. Biggest confidence boost I've had to this day. *Zune. I was on lunch and I was sitting in a small room away from everyone else. I usually have my headphones on, but the wire tends to slip out of my phone from time to time. As the cord came out, I heard a coworker crying and talking to someone on the phone. She recently discovered she was pregnant and wasn't sure who the father of her baby was. She guessed it was one of our co-workers that she had a on and off relationship with and was going to tell him that he was going to be a father when they were meeting up in a few days. That was about a year ago, and to my knowledge he doesn't know that he may not be the father. On the bus outside Sunday school were two preteen boys, and then he ate their brains for his dinner. Dude, that's not what happened. It is. He rose from the dead and then he ate them. Yeah, he came back from the dead, but that doesn't mean he was a zombie. Then why did they call it the Last Supper? I was really young and a group of around 20-year-olds were sitting behind us in hockey game. One chick said, and I quote, "My phone just vibrated so hard in my bra I almost shit myself." Not the weirdest, but still makes me laugh to this day. Overheard a customer on her phone saying, "I do need to go to the doctors because it's itchy and smells really fishy." Okay then. A group of 3 guys walked past me while the middle one screamed, "It's not gay if it's with a woman," and his friend said, "Yes it is." I bet it was about that one Black Mirror episode. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.